The desperate proposal asterisk Zirel stood outside the human professor's office, her 3 fingers trembling as she reached for the door handle. She wasn't supposed to be here not like this. Her kind, the Volari, were proud, graceful, and cold. They never begged, never showed weakness, but here she was, heart racing, stomach heavy. Tail twitching nervously behind her, the door opened with a soft click, and Professor Graham looked up from his desk. He was a calm man with soft brown eyes and short hair that always looked messy. He smiled when he saw her. "Zirel," he said gently. "I didn't expect you this late." She stepped in slowly, her gaze dropping to the floor. I need to speak with you," she said, her voice low and sharp, like slicing ice. "Of course," he nodded. Gesturing to the chair across from him, she sat, stiff and silent, her long limbs folded awkwardly. "I'm failing," she said suddenly. Looking up, her silver eyes met his, and something in her expression was desperate. "If I fail this course, I'll be exiled from my clan." Graham frowned. "I know your scores haven't been strong, but we still have time," he said. "No," she interrupted. "We don't." Her voice trembled. The shame almost choking her, she leaned forward and placed her hand on the desk between them. "I'll offer myself to you," she said, "in return. Give me a passing grade." There was silence in the room. A heavy, sharp silence. Graham blinked once. Shocked but calm. "What do you mean?" "Buy offer yourself," he asked carefully. Zero couldn't meet his eyes now. "My body," she whispered. "You can use me if you want. Just help me pass." Graham leaned back in his chair, folding his arms slowly. He didn't yell, didn't act surprised. But the weight of disappointment in his eyes made Zirel flinch. "I don't trade grades for anything, Zirel," he said. Firmly, but kindly. "Especially not for something like that." "But why not?" she asked, confused. Her people believed in deals and exchanges. If someone had something you needed, you gave something valuable in return. That was the Volari way. And her body was the only thing she still had control over. Graham stood and walked to the window, thinking. The stars outside twinkled, the moons casting soft light into the room. "Tell me something," he said, turning back to her. "Why do you think this is your only option?" Zirel hesitated, her throat tight, because asking for help is weakness. She said, "And weakness means death." Graham walked back to her and knelt beside the desk. Looking into her eyes, "You're not weak for needing help," he said softly. "You're strong for asking, even if it's hard." She stared at him like he was speaking another language. "Help without a price." She asked. "That's not real." "It is for humans," he said, smiling. "Sometimes we help because we care, not because we gain." Zirel's tail curled tighter, her hands shaking. No one had ever told her that before, all her life. She had trained to earn, to fight, to trade. Kindness was a strange new thing. Graham stood and returned to his seat. "If you're willing to learn," he said, "I'm willing to teach. No trades, no bargains, just lessons." She blinked. Confused. "You'll tutor me?" He nodded. Every day after class, she nodded slowly, her voice small. "Okay." As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said without turning. It was the first time she had ever said those words, and meant them. When she walked out, her heart felt heavier, but also warmer. She still didn't understand this human, but something inside her told her that this was the start of something important. Something that might change her future. Professor. Graham sat back in his chair, watching the door close. He sighed, then smiled softly. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he had seen something in Zirel's eyes. Something that reminded him of himself when he was young, lost, afraid, and just needing someone to believe in him. Her first human lesson, Zirel sat in the empty classroom, long after everyone else had left. She looked at the glowing screen. In front of her, filled with symbols and words she still barely understood. Her claws tapped nervously on the desk. Her people were born warriors, not thinkers. But now, she had to learn like a human. The door opened, and Professor Graham walked in with 2 cups. One smelled strong and bitter coffee, she had learned. He placed it on the desk in front of her. "It helps," he said, smiling. She sniffed it, wrinkled her nose, and pushed it slightly away. "It smells like chemicals," she muttered. Graham chuckled. "That's how you know it works." They sat together, side by side, not as teacher and student, but as 2 beings trying to understand each other. He pulled up diagrams, maps, and simple texts. He explained each part with care, using easy words. He didn't laugh when she got confused. He didn't shout when she made mistakes. He simply waited, guided, and smiled. Zero blinked at the glowing screen. Surprised, for the first time, she understood what the map was showing in orbit. A pattern, a cycle. "This is," she whispered. "Clear, yes," Graham nodded. "Because I'm not trying to make you memorize it. I'm helping you feel it." She looked at him sharply. "No teacher has said that to me before." "That's because most teachers want to win, not teach," he replied. "I don't care about power. I care about growth." His words stirred something strange in her chest. Not pain, not anger. Something warm. A feeling she didn't have a name for yet. The door opened again, and a group of students peeked inside. They giggled and whispered, then left Cyrell's ears flattened against her skull. "They think I'm seducing you," she said quietly. Graham didn't even flinch. "Let them think," he said. "Their opinions don't change what's real." She looked at him again. Her silver eyes filled with confusion and something close to respect. "Why are you being kind to me?" She asked. "Because you asked for help, and you trusted me," he said. "Kindness is my way of saying you made the right choice." Her throat tightened. Back home, kindness was a trick. A mask worn before betrayal, but this man wore no mask. Only patience. As the session ended, Graham stood and began packing his notes. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "Same time." She stepped out into the cool night air, but her heart was not cold. She felt a flicker of something inside her, something new, not just hope, but a reason to try. Back in her dorm, she opened the learning file and stared at the glowing lines. This time, she didn't feel fear. She felt fire from that night forward. Cyril stopped studying for a grade. She studied to understand, and when she didn't understand, she asked. Even when it hurt her pride, she asked. Because one human had shown her that knowledge was not a weapon. It was a gift, and she wanted to earn it, not trade for it. Asterisk. A rumor spreads. Asterisk Cyril walked through the academy halls with her shoulders back and eyes forward. She was no longer the confused alien who couldn't read a human chart. But the whispers had grown louder. They followed her like shadows. "She's using her body to get grades," one student said under their breath. "She has the professor wrapped around her claws." Another whispered. Their words were sharp. Not blades, but needles. And they pierced deeper every time she tried to ignore them. She reminded herself that Graham had refused her offer. He had helped her the right way. Still, the shame clung to her like smoke. Valari culture did not understand reputation the same way humans did. But now, Zero was beginning to feel its weight. During a lesson, she raised her hand. The professor called on her, and she answered perfectly. The room fell silent. Then a chuckle. Then a smirk from the back row. Zyrel's tail twitched in anger, but she stayed calm. Graham noticed, but said nothing. He let her win with words, not defense. After class, she stayed behind. "Are you in trouble because of me?" she asked him quietly. Graham shook his head. "I'm not ashamed of helping someone who wants to learn," he said. "But the rumors," she said, "they make you look like a fool." "Let them talk," he replied. "I don't teach for them, I teach for you." His words melted something inside her chest. Zarel had always thought respect had to be earned through fear or challenge. But Graham was respected. Without either, and somehow, that made him stronger. She stood in front of the large mirror in her dorm that night. She touched the side of her face. Staring at her reflection, "Who am I becoming?" She whispered she no longer felt like a Valari warrior. Not completely, but she didn't feel fully human either. She was something new, something in between. The next day, when she passed the gossiping students, she didn't shrink. She looked them in the eye. Her stare was quiet, calm, and full of control. They turned away first, and that small victory burned bright in her chest. In the cafeteria, Zarel sat alone, as always. But a younger alien girl, nervous and trembling, walked over with her tray. "Can I sit here?" the girl asked softly. Zarel nodded. Surprised, they ate in silence for a while. Then the girl said, "I heard you're getting better, even with bad grades." Zarel nodded again. "I studied," she said, "and I asked for help." The girl looked shocked. "You asked?" "Yes," Zarel replied, "and that's how I started to learn." She didn't say the professor's name. She didn't talk about late-night tutoring or coffee or patient smiles. She only spoke about effort and asking, because if even one more student dared to ask, then the rumors would begin to lose their power. Graham continued teaching her after hours. He never brought up the gossip. He focused on her progress, on her thoughts, on her growth. And Zarel found herself enjoying those hours more than any other part of her day. Sometimes she asked questions not to learn, but just to hear him speak. Sometimes she lingered after the lesson, pretending to pack slowly, and sometimes she caught herself smiling when he wasn't even looking. One evening, as they studied, a soft rain fell outside. Graham looked out the window and said, "You know, I think the best students aren't the smartest ones." "Then who are they?" Zarel asked. "The ones who come back, even when it's hard," he said. "The ones who refuse to give up." She nodded slowly. "I think I want to be that kind of student," she said. Graham smiled. "You already are." Zarel didn't answer. She just looked down at her notes, but inside her chest, a storm of new feelings had begun. Not just about learning, but about the human who had changed her life with nothing more than patience. And slowly, the rumors faded, because her grades began to speak louder than whispers. And Zarel began to believe maybe she was more than what others said she was. Maybe she could decide who she wanted to be. Asterisk, her greatest challenge. Asterisk, the Academy's central plaza was packed with students from every corner of the galaxy. Flags from over 50 species waved in the wind. At the center stood the announcement board, glowing bright with new updates. Zarel's name was at the top. She stared at it, her breath caught in her throat. She had been chosen for the interspecies academic challenge. It was the biggest event of the year, an open competition in logic, science, and diplomacy. She hadn't applied. She hadn't even known her name was submitted, but her clan had done it behind her back. If she failed in public, they could say it wasn't their fault. If she won, they would take the credit. Zarel sat alone in the courtyard, her notes forgotten in her lap. Graham found her there, staring into the sky. "I heard the news," he said softly. She didn't look at him. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "You don't have to be ready," he replied. "You just have to try." Her hand shook. "This isn't just a school event," she said. "If I fail, my name will be dragged across the stars. Then we'll prepare," he said. "Every day, every hour, until you believe in yourself." From that day forward, their lessons changed. They no longer studied only facts or numbers. They studied how to think, how to speak, and how to hold herself when everyone watched. In the evenings, they sat under artificial stars in the simulation dome, practicing arguments and questions. Sometimes her answers were wrong, But her voice grew stronger each time. Sometimes she forgot the formula, but she never forgot to breathe. One night, she looked at Graham after a long session. "Why are you doing all this?" She asked. "Why not help someone easier?" "Because your fight is harder," he answered, "and because you care." "I didn't care at first," she admitted. "I know," he said with a smile. "But now you do." She leaned back on the soft grass of the dome floor, looking at the fake sky above them. "It feels real," she said. "It's meant to," he replied. "I want to see the real stars one day," she whispered. "You will," he said. "You'll shine among them." Those words didn't sound like praise. They sounded like a promise. A part of her wanted to believe him. A part of her already did. The next morning, she woke before the sun. She reviewed her notes, practiced speaking aloud, corrected her posture, and breathed through her nerves. The day of the challenge was near. And for the first time in her life, Zyrel wasn't training to survive. She was training to be seen. Her fellow Valari students stayed away from her. To them, she was already half human, but Zyrel no longer cared. She had found something better than acceptance. She had found purpose. Graham handed her a final sheet. "This is the last mock session," he said. "After this, it's up to you." She nodded, taking the paper with steady fingers. "I'll make you proud," she said quietly. "You already have," he replied without hesitation. That night, Zyril didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching stars move across the black sky. She thought of her clan, her home, the cold halls where warmth was weakness. She thought of Graham, his soft voice and his strong silence, and she made a decision. She would no longer fight to please them. She would fight for herself. For every moment she felt stupid, for every whisper she had endured, for every second she believed she wasn't enough. And in that moment, the fear inside her began to change. It didn't vanish, but it turned into something sharper, something she could use. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered to herself, "I am not here to beg for spies. I am here to earn it." And when morning came, Zyril stepped into the arena with her head high and her heart burning bright. The test day, the grand arena pulsed with light and sound as crowds gathered from across the galaxy. Floating cameras hovered, broadcasting the interspecies academic challenge live across star systems. Judges sat on elevated chairs, tall and distant, with expressionless faces. Zyril stood alone behind her podium, her name glowing beneath her feet. Her heartbeat thudded so loud she thought the audience could hear it. She scanned the crowd and spotted Graham in the second row. Calm as ever, he gave her a nod, simple, steady, silent. Her tail loosened just a little. A tall judge, skin like polished stone, spoke in a booming voice. "Begin." The first question flashed across the screen, written in 3 alien scripts and human English. Her eyes darted over the words. It was a physics puzzle about orbital decay and mass drift. She remembered the way Graham had drawn the orbit on paper. Using a coffee cup and a spoon, she smiled and spoke her answer slowly. The lights blinked green. Correct? A ripple moved through the crowd. The Valari girl had scored first. More questions followed: biology, intergalactic law, ancient history, strategy, translation. Each one tried to trap her, twist her, break her, but she stood firm. She made mistakes, small ones, but corrected them fast. She didn't panic. She had learned how to breathe. A judge leaned forward and asked a question that wasn't on the list. "What is the most important value in a leader?" Gasps echoed. This wasn't knowledge, it was character. Zyril paused. Her clan would say dominance. Her instinct said control, but her heart whispered another answer. "Compassion," she said aloud, "because without it, all power becomes cruelty." Silence fell. Then a bell chimed, marking the end of the challenge. She stepped back from the podium, her legs trembling slightly. The scores appeared in the air, floating symbols translating live. Zyrel's name was first. She had won. The crowd clapped politely, some louder than others. But Zyrel didn't hear it. She only saw Graham standing slowly, clapping with pride in his eyes. He didn't smile big, didn't shout, but his nod said everything. You did it. She walked off the stage, past the other contestants, past the judges, past the cameras. She didn't stop until she reached him. They stood face to face, and she whispered, "I didn't win for them, I know," he said. "You won for you." She didn't know what to do with the joy inside her. It wasn't loud, it wasn't wild, it was deep, a soft fire in her chest. Steady and strong. Later that night, alone in her room, she stared at the medal on her table. It sparkled, but that didn't matter. What mattered was what it represented. Every step, every mistake, every late-night lesson, every breath she refused to give up. She held the medal close and whispered one word in Valeri. Inara. It meant becoming, and for the first time in her life, Zyrel felt whole. Asterisk what she really wanted. Asterisk the victory ceremony was over, the cameras were gone, and the medal lay untouched in its velvet box. Zyrel sat in silence by the Academy's small garden, watching the leaves shift in the evening breeze. She had won, but her chest felt strangely heavy. There were no cheers from her clan, only a message, short and cold. You have done your duty. Return when summoned. No joy, no pride, no warmth. She didn't cry. Valeri, don't cry. But her hands clenched so tightly her claws left marks on her palms. She wandered the halls alone until she reached the classroom where everything had changed. The lights were off, but she knocked anyway. The door opened, and Graham stood there in a simple shirt, holding a stack of books. He looked surprised, but stepped aside. You're always welcome here, he said softly. She walked in slowly, her gaze tracing the room where he had once offered her coffee in kindness instead of shame. I didn't come for a lesson, she said. He smiled. Then why are you here? Zyrel turned toward him, her silver eyes uncertain. When I first came here, I tried to offer myself to you, she said, voice steady, in trade for a grade. I remember, he said gently, and I refused. You did. She nodded. And then you gave me something else. He said nothing, letting her speak. You gave me time, effort, respect, she said. You saw me as a person when I didn't even see myself. He looked into her eyes, listening closely. I've never owed someone more in my life, she whispered. But I don't want to repay you. I want to give myself to you, this time by choice. Graham didn't speak immediately. The silence between them was not heavy, it was gentle. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and kind. I care about you, Zyrel, he said. But this isn't something we rush. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed. I'm not trying to trade anymore, she said quietly. I'm just trying to be seen. Graham walked closer and placed his hand lightly on her shoulder. I see you, he said. Not because you won. It's not because you tried to offer something. But because you've grown, because you found your strength. She felt warmth rise in her chest again, but this time she didn't fight it. She let it stay. I don't want to go back to my clan, she admitted. Not now, not yet. You don't have to, he said. You still have time to choose your path. She looked around the classroom, the place where she had once offered her body. In fear, now she stood taller, and her voice didn't shake. I think what I really wanted wasn't an A or a title, she said. I just wanted someone to believe I was worth more. Graham nodded. And now you know you are. They stood together in the quiet room, not as teacher and student, but as two souls who had helped each other become more. Zyrel stepped outside and looked up at the stars. They no longer felt distant. For the first time, she didn't just dream of being among them. She believed she could reach them. Her first A+, asterisk, the final grades were posted across the academy's digital wall. Names floated in glowing letters. One by one, students rushed forward, some laughing, some groaning. Zirel didn't run. She walked, calm and quiet, her tail steady, her shoulders straight. She scanned the list until her eyes landed on it, her name. Shining bright with straight A's, she blinked once, then twice, as if checking it again. There was no mistake, she had earned it. There were no shortcuts this time. No trades, no desperate offers, just work. Late nights, whispered lessons, silent tears, and quiet victories. She didn't smile, not yet. Her heart was still catching. Up to her eyes, whispers filled the hall again, but this time they were different. "That's the Valari girl," someone said. "She aced every subject," said another. "I heard she never asked for special treatment. She just studied." Zirel walked past them. Her eyes focused ahead. She no longer needed to defend herself. Her work had done it for her. Outside the classroom, Graham sat on the bench, under the old star map tree, reading quietly. He looked up and smiled before she even spoke. "I saw the list," he said. "Congratulations." Zirel sat beside him, placing a folded paper on his lap. It was her grade report, marked with clean lines and glowing seals. "I didn't come to brag," she said. "I came to thank you." He glanced at the paper, but kept his eyes on her. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "You did the work." "I know," she said softly. "But you believed in me before I believed in myself." There was a long pause between them, but it was full of peace, not awkwardness, the kind of silence that felt like home. Zirel looked at the sky, her voice steady. "My clan called again," she said. "They want me to return as a symbol of honor. And will you?" Graham asked. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I'm not a symbol. I'm a student." Graham smiled. "Then what now?" "I want to stay," she said. "Help other alien students who feel lost. I want to teach them what you taught me." He nodded, proud but quiet. "You'll make a better teacher than I ever was," he said. Zirel looked at him. Something soft in her eyes. "Maybe," she whispered. "But I'll still come to you when I forget how to believe." "You won't forget," he said, "but I'll be here anyway." As the sun dipped low over the academy's towers, Zirel stood tall. Not as a failure, not as a mistake, not even as a warrior, but as a voice, a light, a new kind of Valari, her. First A+ wasn't just a grade, it was proof that even someone broken by fear could rise, and that one act of human kindness could echo forever.